Data-driven feature development, creating new features for a product and measure it, and by that immediately understand how a feature is used and if the adoption works how we wanted it to work, sounds like one of the biggest no-brainer in product development by default. Of course, everyone would like to have this kind of data. It would be super useful to get this as one input, and this is not the only one. You might also still do user interviews, you make some other kind of analysis, but this kind of data is extremely helpful to understand. Do people understand how this feature works? Do they start to use it? Do we have to educate them more? And so it gives you so many signals back to the product team to make sure that this hard work, every feature is hard work, that this feature is used as best as possible, because we all know that it can provide a lot of value. So no brainer, but still most of the features go live without being measured. And let's talk about this today, why most of the features are not tracked and what we can do with it. Because today I want to show you a way how you can measure a feature without implementing tracking. This sounds really good, doesn't it? Okay, so let's get into this.
This video is sponsored by Mixpanel. Mixpanel has a new way to do product analytics with your warehouse data. You can connect Mixpanel to your data warehouse, and then you can run all the product analytics investigations and all the product analytics deep dives on top of your data warehouse data with clean, prepared, and high quality data. Check out the link in the description to learn more about their offering. I'm using it and I'm extremely happy to have this new kind of setup for product analytics because it unlocks so many more use cases on top of much better data than before.
Well, let's start with a real world example, because I think this makes it a lot easier to go along the whole way to really show you, okay, how can we achieve that? This sounds pretty bold here, measure a new feature without tracking. And I guess a lot of product managers are like, wait a second, I definitely want to pass this on to my development teams. Let's get started there. Let's assume we are a whiteboard application, like the whiteboard that you just see here at the moment. So we are a whiteboard app. Our product team has worked super hard to bring in a new feature, and this new feature are video comments. So now I could, when I work on this here, you see my video now right next to it, but if I would work just on the whiteboard, I can go in here and can say, okay, I make a quick video comment because I want to explain something or I want to ask a question and so on. Product team did a lot of research before, figured out that the feedback and let's say, so giving feedback is something that is sometimes hard because it's hard to explain. People do meetings to discuss whiteboards, and they wanted to show a way how you can get rid of some of these meetings by giving people better ways to comment or to ask questions about a whiteboard. And so they introduced video comments. Video comments, as you can imagine, I can click here somewhere, can record a quick video, then it shows up here. Maybe even that shows like a little thumbnail. You can already see that someone has just recorded something. Someone else can watch it and can answer to it with a video or can just write some text. So this is what they have introduced. So video comments, everyone is super keen on knowing, okay, what is happening. So let's have a look how the normal way would look like. And then, of course, we might also understand why it often fails. Let's assume we introduce a new video comments. Everything will be developed, but at some part we have to define the tracking for the feature. And this means that someone has to write a ticket, and in this ticket we have, let's say, the events that we want to track with, let's say, the name, the properties, where it is triggered. So all the nice thing that potentially can go wrong along the way. And then someone from the development team, so needs tracking, is implemented. And this sounds very straightforward, but as we all know, is tracking implementation is usually not straightforward because it's not something that developers do all the time. They are still focusing on fixing some issues with the video comments. Tracking is implemented would be an ideal state, but what we see in between is life happens. What it means is a lot of things from here to here can go wrong. It can be anything, so it can be just pushed back. So again, most of the reasons why it doesn't happen is that there still are too many things that have to be fixed. And then the launch date comes near. But you need the launch date because like marketing is running a lot of promotion around that. And so they prepared everything and they cannot just hold it on for a long time. So you need some kind of fixed date when you bring stuff out. And so if you have a fixed date and you want to publish something, you leave out things that go live. And tracking is often one of these things that you just push back because you say like, the feature works without tracking. So it's just, okay, we get no feedback, but the feature still works. So we push it out. So this is one problem. Another problem, of course, can happen is like that this defining the tracking never really happens because people forget or people don't really know how they should define events. A lot of things here can go wrong so that we don't really have data to measure the new feature, which, of course, if you would ask people, do you want to have a dashboard to see how this adoption of feature video comments goes? Everyone says yes, but there are a lot of things that can happen here why it cannot happen. Then there's another problem that is often overlooked is we don't know all the questions yet. So one of the things that we data people often unreflectedly is, yeah, you just need to define all the questions beforehand and then you know what you need to track. In theory, this is possible. But honestly, I do this for 10 years. And every time I implement feature tracking and I start the analysis with the data that we collect, I come up with new stuff. I usually come up with a follow-up question, which is a good thing, but then I recognize, okay, the data is missing. You have to be sure that whenever you define all this, there will be this one question that is super cool and super interesting, but you don't have the data for it. In the normal way, this would mean we go all this way again. We have to implement everything by hand again. This slows things down significantly. And this is also like one of the reasons why then often like features are not fully measured and not really analyzed. And so you move on to the next feature because it takes too long. And what can we do that stuff doesn't take so long? One of the things is, what if we just skip everything that is happening here? Now you ask the obvious question, how should this work? We need the data. Let me show you how measurement without tracking works. You will see definitely some requirements that have to be there. Let me start there. And of course, we will look into a real example in a second. When developers develop a new feature, they usually use an application database. With our video comments, when they implement this new feature, there will be a table for the video comments. It might look like this because they have to save it somewhere. If someone adds a video comment, you have to save the information so that when someone loads the dev, that you see the video comment. This information has to be saved somewhere. They will have pretty likely a database table somewhere, might be called video comment, where they save, when someone creates a video comment, all the information about this video comment. What kind of user has added it? For which kind of whiteboard was it added? What's the duration? What is the video file? Is it just video? Is it audio? And so on. All the information that then the front-end developers or application developers need to show this feature within the whiteboard. This information is already there. And the crazy thing is, like, when you do tracking, what you do is you just take this information that is loaded from this table and then provide it to the front end. You just try to take this information and then send it back to our analytical tool. We can do something different. And of course, if you have followed my videos, you will not be surprised with the thing that we just introduced here. We will introduce our obvious candidate in the middle, and this is again our data warehouse. If you already have an established data setup, there's one thing that is usually already implemented, and this is this. So usually, like most of the data warehouse setup that I worked with, one of the first integration that you do in a data warehouse is like you load all the data in the application database into data warehouse. It's often like the starting point to use a data warehouse because you don't want to have the crazy data people run live queries against the application database and then basically slow the system down by any kind of weird heavy load analytical queries running against this database, because this database serves a different purpose. It serves the application, not an analyst. So one of the first things that often happens when you start with a data setup is like that you sync all the data from the application database into data warehouse. It can happen in different kind of ways, but let's say, okay, the data is there. This is good for us because when we already have a synchronization of this data into the data warehouse, this new nice table, video comments, is most likely already ending up in a data warehouse. And even if not, it's pretty straightforward for them to extend the data pipeline to just include this new table as well. We have the data already in the data warehouse, which is good for us, because what we can now do is we can create an event model for the video comments. Based on the data that we already have here. And then we can then use this data to sync everything into Mixpanel. And in Mixpanel, it behaves like normal event data. For a user that is using Mixpanel then, it doesn't really make a difference if this data for the event comments is coming from some tracking implementation, or it's just coming from our data warehouse where we prepare everything in the right kind of shape and the right kind of form, and then push it into Mixpanel. For the product team that wants to understand how the feature is performing, actually they don't care where the data is coming from. And even if you need to sell this, the best selling point is this is the baseline data. All the data that is here in our table, video comments, is the data that you will always compare the Mixpanel data against to see if the data is right or not. If we take the source data from if you take the source data from the real source where the data is coming from, then of course you have a lot better chance to get really high data quality. This makes it so nice. We don't implement any kind of tracking. What we just do is we take the thing that is already built to build the feature and take the data from there and then provide it into Mixpanel. Maybe you don't trust me that this is possible, so let me show you this in a real-world example. Okay, so I created, of course, a simulated data set, which in the end shows everything, but it's pretty close to what you will have in your real application thing. Let's say we are loading our application database and not our data warehouse. And so then, of course, we also load the table about the video comments. And this table might look like this. This is usually like how application database tables for a specific kind of features can look like. So let's have a quick look how this looks. Naturally, we have an ID for the video comment. Then we also, they have to do it. They will save the information about the user who has left the comment because this is something they will show in the front end. And then most likely, because this usually comes by default, they will have a created add field. So once they start to save some information about the video comment, like this creates a first row, and then this by default creates a created add timestamp. And this is super helpful for us. And then because the application team needs to know all the different kind of statuses that a video can have, because they have to show something like this. For example, they have to know when a recording is aborted, because this might be an indicator for them to, after some time, just delete this. This can be something, for example, that after 24 hours, they go through the table and they just delete everything that has been aborted. But they still want to save this information because people can maybe retake something and they want to analyze if, for example, abortion rate for video, if there are problems in the process that videos cannot be recorded. So this aborted add timestamp is super helpful for them to save it even when it doesn't really provide any kind of application value. But you see this often that this is still implemented. And for us, it's perfect because we want to have this kind of event. Discarded is something different. It's like someone records a video comment, but then decides not to save it. They say, okay, I discard, I want to do it again. Still important information, so they will keep it in here because at some point you want to implement a feature where it say, no, we don't want to discard it, so we resurface it. Or again, you want to see, they want to understand how many videos have been discarded to analyze it later. And then obviously we will always have a published add status and timestamp when people basically publish something. How this looks like always comes down how your application engineers are working is, but it's something that you can start a dialogue with them, how they create these kind of tables, and you can try to influence them to add these kind of timestamp about the different kind of status here. Another design practice that, let's say, when you don't do it like this, that I often see is that you have a status field. So you have a status, created, aborted, discarded, published. if they just have this, you can just ask them, okay, would it be possible to set this timestamps here as well, which often is definitely possible, because these timestamps are super valuable for us, and we will show you in a second why it is like this. And then, of course, like we get some context information about the duration, and then if it's with a video or if it's just audio. And then, of course, like if someone is deleting a video comment, then of course we want to have this information here as well. And so it might be that we have a deleted ad field. Obviously, because this is an example, so we have an idealistic state. But I often work with these kind of tables, and I often see variants of these already implemented. And again, this is a conversation that when you start out to develop this feature, for developers, this is a lot easier to provide these kind of fields in the database than to implement any kind of tracking, at least from my experience. But you can just talk to them about it. This is how it looks for us. So we load this table in our data warehouse. And so for us, it's now like we just have to translate this kind of table into proper events. And if you have watched some videos that I created before, you already know that this is not really like a huge exercise to do that. And so let's have a quick look how this can look like. I just didn't even create a full DBT model here. So I just created a quick query where I just generate different kind of events from that. And because as you will see, it's pretty straightforward. We create a unique identifier because it's always good to have a unique identifier for events. And in the end, we just created it based on the ID of the video comment and then on the created ad field here. We start by creating a unique identifier because like it's good practice to have a unique identifier for each kind of modeled field that we have, because like it helps us to check, to run tests against that. And then we could also use it in the Mixpanel import to check that we don't introduce duplicate events. And so we created by using the video comment ID and here the timestamp when this video has been created to create a unique identifier. And then we use the created ad field here as a timestamp, and then we just define our event like video comment started, because this is like when we assume that the video comment has started, because this is when we create this entry. And then of course naturally we use the user ID because this is super helpful for us to later stitch the different kind of events together. And then we provide some context here with the comment ID, because we might enrich our data later, because like we have more information about this comment which we don't use at the moment, so we can still enrich it. We provide the comment ID already as a property. And then of course would be interesting for us, is this a video? Is just an audio file for later the product team to analyze, okay, how these two different modes are used across the feature. And so with this, we have created our first event, and then we just go through all the different kind of states that it can have. Naturally, we are interested in when they are aborted. So here we do the same thing. The only thing is what we make sure is we just want to check for all the video comments where they actually have been aborted. So these are the ones that we import as video comment aborted. And then we go through all the different kind of other event states like saved, of course, very important for us. And we do it in the same way. This is how we construct all the different kind of events. And then here we bring it all together. And then in the end, we can just create a table based on that. Of course, like we would create a view out of it. And so here I quickly just save this as a new table in our demo set. So we save that. Okay, great. And so we have a new table here. As you can see here, we have feature events, and they look like this. Basically the output that you already saw. Now we just have to get it into Mixpanel. You would have a full setup already in Mixpanel where you have all your tracked events in there, and you just extend your existing setup. This is the interesting thing with the warehouse import. So you can have still tracks things with your SDK. You just extend the setup with the warehouse data. So here, this is a blank new project because I just want to show you how this feature works. I just show you now how you add the data, and so we don't have other data as well. But I think you get the idea. In other videos, I usually skip this step, but I thought, okay, at one video, I at least have to show you how to connect your warehouse to Mixpanel because it's pretty straightforward. We go in here. So as you could see, we have the data in BigQuery. So we go in here and we want to create a new BigQuery connection. So the only thing what we have to do is we have to run these commands here in our Google Cloud Shell, and I'll show you how to do this in a second. We just copy this information here, and then we go over to BigQuery again, and then we open the Cloud Shell, so you can find it here in the top right. You have to wait a little bit. Okay, so our Cloud Shell instance is ready, and as you can see, it's a classic terminal. And what we have to do, so we copy these commands here, and we just paste them in here, and we just hit enter, and then it asks us to authorize it, which we quickly do, and now it runs, and that's it. This is how much you have to do to connect your data warehouse to Mixpanel. It's extremely straightforward. The only thing which we shouldn't forget is we have to get back here and we have to create the source. Now we have everything. Now we have everything set up. The next step for us is like to load the data into Mixpanel. And so we go here into warehouse data, and then we want to create an event table. So then we have to add the events. We pick the source that we have created before. Then we look for the data set that we were just using, which is feature performance. Then we pick the feature event table that we had before. Then we have to do some mapping. So here, it's not a static value. We pick the activity column, which we have here. So here we get all the event names now. We pick the timestamp. Then we have to pick what is our user ID. Here we have the user ID. And then we can add some mapping where we add our properties. And here we just can assign the properties that we create. And as you can see here, it expects the properties as a JSON field. And this is also like why we prepared it like this. And here in the preview, you can already see like the kind of data that we now get into it. And you could even expand this and can see, okay, this is like how we get the data in there. And so with all the properties that we might need, for example, comment ID, we get in here, and then with video or not, if we have the information or not. Here you can always check, okay, if it looks right. And then we just create it, and then it just creates the import. And it usually doesn't really take that long because we are just talking about 45,000 events, so it's not really so much. No, it runs the full backfill, but it should be ready after some seconds. And as you can see here, it took us 7 seconds, everything in there. So it's good, full backfill in here. And now we can actually start this from a procedure. You can set this up before the feature goes live because the table will already be there. And you can set everything up. Of course, make sure that you connect to the production table. So not that you have all the test data in there, but if you, for example, use Mixpanel in 2 different stages, so for prod and for development, then of course, like you can also sync in already the development table, and you can prepare already the kind of dashboards for it. But if you connect everything before and you sync already the events before, at the moment the feature goes live, the product team can say, now we can get started. We have the events in there. So we can look in how the events is performing. As you as a product analyst can now go in here and can say, okay, let me quickly create a new insight. And I have all the events in there without tracking. So we haven't tracked anything. We were just loading it. So we can go in there and can say, okay, let's have a look how many comments, how many people have started to use the feature. And you can see here, okay, looks already good. We don't really simulate that this feature just went live. It went live basically 30 days ago. And we have the data already in here. So let's add another one. Let's add another event. Let's say at least we want to see how many comments have been saved. So yeah, that looks good. This already indicates, at least like for us as a product team, so we could already now save this. So we can say this is for the video comment board, video comment release. So we save this as a new board. We have the first report for the product team ready, and everyone loves this to see how many people are using the new feature. And then, of course, like this already shouts out pretty loudly to become a funnel. So let's create another one. Let's create a funnel, and we can do the same thing. So we can go in there, video comment started, video comment saved. And now we already have a report for feature success rate. We save it here, and then we can already say comment saved rate. This is great. Now the product team can see like people who get started. We have 77% already that are saving the comment. And obviously we can now go in and can really can try to understand, okay, how many people are discarding it, how many people are boarding it. And we could even go in and can check, okay, are there actually already people who do this for the second time? So what we can do is we can create another report to just understand, okay, how many people actually start to add a comment and start again to really see feature retention. And here we can see we actually have around 5% of people over time that are reusing the feature. This is a good baseline. Now, with no tracking, we already have essential reports for the product team to really understand how the feature is adopted from the people. And so if we would have a full data set, we could now even go in there and could get the full users, and then from the full users to, let's say, video comment started, we could even, let's calculate the first adoption rate, and then of course like second level adoption rates to see how many people have saved, how many people are returning, which we have calculated here. We can build a full feature adoption dashboard, and we haven't implemented any tracking line. We were just using the data that was already there. Let's quickly wrap this up. So what are the requirements to go this way? One requirement is like, naturally, you have a data warehouse, or at least you have, it's not really required that you have a data warehouse. It can also be like that you have a copy of your application database, or you have a read. So if you talk to your engineers, you can ask them if you have a read replica of your database. So this is a copy of your database, but the most important thing is if you run queries against this one, you don't impact the application database with weird queries that you want. So this is something that you don't want to do. Another case is if you don't have a data warehouse would be like to create a nightly sync out from your application database into Mixpanel, but it's possible to do these kind of things, but only do this if you don't really have a data warehouse. You don't have to introduce a data warehouse just for this use case, but just talk to your engineers to see, okay, how can we load the data from here into Mixpanel? Let's assume you already have a data warehouse and you already sync the application database into your data warehouse, which is a common use case. If you have this, then you're already ready to go. So then you can just discuss with your data engineers or with your analytics engineers, hey, can we not just create an event model where we take the data that was already here in the table video comment and just express it as events. And this is the part that I showed here. And as you can see here, this is not a complex query that we have created. You can show your analytics engineers this kind of video and can show them like, this is what we want to achieve. We prepare all the data already as event data, and then we sync it up into Mixpanel. And this can be done pretty early on. Once the product engineers know how this kind of table will look like, and so this is like stable, so they will not change it anymore. At this point of time, you can already start to create the implementation into Mixpanel that when the feature goes live, the data is automatically there. It's the same like with tracking, but you save a lot of time to implement tracking, to test tracking, and so on. You have a much more straightforward way. The only thing what you can keep in mind is when you talk to your product engineers, if they can add timestamps to the table instead of just a status field. This is usually not so much effort for them to do. You can discuss it and you can explain to them that it's for you, you can do a lot of things with that, and so they can help you with just a small change how they implement things. This definitely is something that is helpful from the table design if it's there. I know that a lot of product engineers work in this kind of way, so it's not like a totally exotic kind of approach. This is something that you have to make sure. So you can discuss with them if it's there, and if everything is in place, you can now roll out all your features in the same kind of way if there's a table already saved. Sometimes you have some features where you just change some interactions, then it might not be possible. But I would say for 80% of the features that you release, there are some tables in your database that are already filled, and you can use this way to immediately make them available in your product analytics tool and without adding some kind of tracking. I hope this was useful. If you have any kind of questions, just leave a comment so I can answer your question. If you like this video, like it, because this helps me that more people see this and they don't have to wait for tracking. And just make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos about product analytics. And then see you in the next video.